Hello, friends. Today, my sermon comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, verse 22 through 33. And I'm reading to you from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. It says, "Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, 'It is a ghost.' And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, 'Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid.' Peter answered him, 'Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water.' He said, 'Come.' So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, 'Lord, save me.' Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, 'You of little faith, why do you doubt?' When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, 'Truly, you are the Son of God.'" It had been a long and hot day. Earlier, Jesus and his disciples got the bad news that John the Baptist had been killed. After hearing this news, Jesus had his disciples take him by boat to a deserted place, a lonely place in some accounts. But he wasn't alone for long, because the crowds followed him. Remember, they followed him wherever he went. When he saw the people with all their needs, he was filled with compassion. And he took the time to talk to them, to touch them, to heal the sick, and to teach them. But when the evening came, the disciples, who were probably tired from a long emotional day, asked Jesus to send the crowds away so that they can go and get food. But instead, Jesus took 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed them. And the text says 5,000 people ate, and there were 12 baskets of leftovers. After this story, Jesus told the disciples to get back into the boat and go on to the other side of the sea while he sent the crowds away. The journey would be long, but they would be able to take turns resting, or at least they thought they would. When the boat got to the middle of the sea, it was tossed by the waves, and the wind was blowing in all different directions. This was a small fishing boat, so the heavy swells would have battered this boat. Early that morning, Jesus went to the disciples on the sea, but he wasn't in a boat. He was actually walking on the sea. When they saw him walking on the sea, they were afraid and said, "It is a ghost." But immediately Jesus said to them, "Be of good cheer, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus simply replies, "Come." Peter complied and began walking on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw how violent the wind was and felt the roaring of the wind, he felt fear and he began sinking. He calls out to Jesus to save him, and immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why do you doubt?" And when they got back into the boat, the wind became calmer, and they all worshipped Jesus and proclaimed, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Todd Boland was an associate professor of biblical studies at the Israel Bible Extension near Jerusalem. And he says the Sea of Galilee is known for its violent storms, which came up suddenly and be life-threatening for anyone on its waters. He says the tempests are caused by the situation of the lake in the Jordan Rift, with steep hills on all sides. The cooler air masses from the surrounding mountains collide with the warm air in the lake's basin. The most violent storms are caused by the fierce winds which blow off the Golan Heights in the east. He says in 1992, one storm sent waves 10 feet, 3 meters high, crashing into downtown Tiberias, and it caused significant damage to the entire city. In the first century, during Jesus' time, these storms came up quickly in this area. Peter, James, John, and Andrew, 4 of the disciples were fishermen, so they would have been familiar with these storms. It must have been distressing to be caught in a storm without any warning. The disciples were caught in a physical storm in our Bible text, and some of us have lived through that ordeal, be it a hurricane or a flash flood, and it's devastating to lose our homes and our loved ones. There are also other storms which happen in our lives, which are traumatic events, which give no warning and bring pain and suffering in our lives. When a husband or wife suddenly dies, or a parent or a child, that can be a storm we face. When a spouse or a partner asks for a separation when we thought things were going well, that could be a storm. When we lose our job or receive a devastating health diagnosis, these are also storms which we face. These are metaphorical storms which make us feel like we're drowning. I've been there, and I know that at some point, I don't know when, I will be there again. I'll be battling the storm of fear, of doubt, and of sorrow. Storms come in all different sizes and intensities in our lives. Lillian Smith in her book wrote, "Trouble, why do we fear it? Why do we dread ordeal? Every good thing the human race has experienced was trouble for somebody. Our birth was trouble for our mothers. To support us was trouble for our fathers and our mothers. Books, paintings, music, great buildings, good food, ideas, the nameless joys and excitements which added up to what we call a good life, come out of the travail of countless hearts and minds." The name of the book is Now is the Time. But we must not think that God inflicts these challenges upon us, because God's plan for us is for good and not for evil. God doesn't send storms, but God does love and support us through them. God has confidence that you and me, that we can withstand whatever comes our way. Storms rise, storms blow, but storms also come to an end. And there are times when there's something beautiful at the end of these storms. Dolly Parton once said, "The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you gotta put up with the rain." As you listen to this message today, I know that some of you might be in the middle of your storm and you are afraid. This is God's word for you today. Remember to keep your eyes on the one who's walking through the storm to help you and to comfort you. Trust that God is in control. Do what's within your control and leave the rest to God. And always remember that you are not alone and never will be. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of the Lord abides forever. Have a blessed and wonderful day. Goodbye for now.